Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. A big thank you to all the amazing speakers we've had today. It blows me away. And anybody that puts a map out there is a heroine or a hero to me. And specifically, a lot of people, in this conference, just mapping heroes and inspirations to me. So thank you. And then, a huge thank you to Paul and the whole team for organising the event. It's just been brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Jonni Walker. Yep, you may laugh at that name. It's a bit of a blessing and a curse, but that's that. Anyway, my dad's name is Roy, which is even worse, sort of Roy Walker, the old Irish comedian. Anyway, I mean, I don't know what's going on in our family with names and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm a cartographer. I work for Mapbox. As Paul had said, I actually used to work for Tableau, so I got using Mapbox via that and importing their map styles through into Tableau dashboards, etc. I'm based out of the UK, though. I live in York. But much of my work, and I spend way too much time on Twitter and particularly in Macbook Studio for styling maps. So today I wanted to speak about the amazing cartographers that are out there and who might influence you, who influence me, and how emulating their work can help you, and it certainly helps me practice being a better cartographer, and it also helps me to master the and it would help you master your cartographic tool of choice. Like I say, it's more of a, this is a tool agnostic talk, but I do work for Mapbox, so that's a map there at the bottom I've created in Macbook Studio. But let's carry on. So this is really about studying others' work in detail. It's about practice, it's about learning, and then how you can apply that to your own future work. I am learning every day. There's so much content being put out there. There's so much to learn in your tool. There's so much to learn in the craft. There's so much inspiration, so much new things being created with amazing techniques that it'd just be boring if you didn't learn something all the time. So one of the ways I try and do this is to, I try to replicate work by others to test my ability to recreate it. And in that, I learn so much in that process about those cartographic techniques, about the software I use, and that benefits me in future creations. There was a great quote that Alberto Cairo put on Twitter the other day. He's been, I think during some of his Zoom meetings, he's been going back to learning how to draw. And there was this wonderful quote, you can see it there on the screen, but it was more the fact about, do you really need to be sort of naturally talented in design and things like that? No, you don't. It's about practice and persistence. That matters much, much more than innate talent. And it just really struck with me because I'm not very creative. I can't draw, I can't paint. I was useless at art at school. And I think my sort of maps only really have come through this practicing, studying, a tenacious will and passion to make something look better than something, better than it can be, or better than the thing I did in the past. So this is really about, heroes and your heroines and how people who inspire you. There's way too many people to cover, and particularly in a sort of 20-minute or so talk. However, for me, the greatest bit of inspiration for me has always been the maps that have been produced by and for National Geographic. Just the hugest of inspirations to me over time, just stylistically, the subject matters, etc. And that therefore brings me on to one particular person that I want to talk about today. Somebody who thoroughly influences me. And it's this gentleman, Eric Knight. Now, Eric does so much work for the National Geographic, but he's just got the most awesome website. If you Google Eric Knight Maps, I think it's ericknightmaps.com is his website. If you've never seen his work before, I'm sure people will have, even if you didn't realize it was his work. But his style of cartography is just, it just makes me dribble and my mouth drop to the floor every time I see a piece of his work. His maps, his infographics, his panoramas, and just incredible stuff. And what I love about it is it's almost like a mix of imagery and cartography and illustration. And I don't exactly know what tools he uses. I don't really care. It's just so beautiful to look at. But his work has hugely inspired me, and it probably kind of shows over the last, I think, last 6 months or so on Twitter. You know, I've probably been putting out little things that are probably very heavily influenced by him. So his maps are amazing, but his panoramas are just simply stunning. The scale of them, but it's other things. It's the labeling and the colors and the tones and the textures and the things that he uses. They're just amazing. And please go and have a look at his website. Again, I can't recommend that enough. Just absolute amazing stuff. So I was kind of like, right, how on earth am I going to try and create some of this stuff in Mapbox Studio? And I actually did try to create some of the 2D maps in a 3D-esque fashion. And I did all right. It was okay. It was kind of fine. But luckily, all the brains at Mapbox actually enabled me to be able to do this a little bit easier. So very recently introduced to Mapbox Studio. Sorry, this isn't the sales pitch, but it's just part of what's enabled me to be able to try and recreate some of this amazing work. Recently introduced have been 3D terrain, a sky layer, and a fog element. It's those three things together that have really been sort of enabled me to try and recreate the things. So this is just a bit of Mapbox Studio's satellite imagery layer. I think it's a small hill just outside of Scunthorpe somewhere. But if I play the video now, you'll see just quickly with a couple of sort of toggles of a few buttons, you can sort of create something that's a little bit more exciting. So I've enabled the terrain there. I'm enabling the fog. I've just set the distance a little bit better. And when I pitched that, this has kind of been the thing that's enabled me to create the panoramas. So now it's got 3D terrain, we've got fog, and then eventually you'll kind of see the sky come in. So it's totally those features that have really helped. So let's go back to Eric's work. This is his homepage, but this map. I've been spending a lot of time really trying to study Eric's work. This particular map. And there's just so much to learn from it. If I zoom in a little, I don't know, what I've been trying to understand is why it works so well. What colors is he using? The tones of the colors, the labels, the halo colors, the colors of the glaciers, the colors of the rocks, the colors of the grass, the colors of the forests. What greens is he using? What grays, browns is he using for the rocks? What blues for the lakes? Is symbology, you know, just these little simple sort of triangular pointing lines to the peaks. And the other thing is I hope you can probably see my mouse pointer, is these kind of little ridge lines that sort of show off the difference between this ridge and the mountains in the back. And again, it happens down here. And just all these little details, trying to study it, why the color, and then studying the tones that he uses and the overall palettes. And I spent an incredible amount of time, you know, just using online palette finders to sort of try and, you know, analyze some of the images, just to sort of kind of see why do all these tones work so well together. And then you get this sort of like spectrum of color that is just like, it's so similar and beautiful, and they just complement each other, and wonderful, wonderful things. Here's another piece of his work. So he's just mapped part of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. Again, just a wonderful, wonderful map. But the thing that's just sort of stands out to me is certain uses of color. These beautiful curved, sweeping labels for mountain ranges. The color of the font, the color of the halo, but also he tends to use, for sort of built up areas, this sort of purple lilac color, in this particular case just for the roads. And it's just sort of, you know, why does that work so well, and why does this combination of colors work so well? Okay, so complementary colors, that that purpley lilac color stands out really beautifully well against the green or the orange that he's using there. So just certain little tricks like that, just color, just use of color, complementary colors, and using the color wheel and seeing which bits are opposite, etc. Yeah, just I could spend all day looking at this. But that's the other part of his work that amazes me. You know, it's so detailed. I think there's one of his panoramas is of the Alps, and if you go onto his website, you can zoom in to the panorama, and you just see the amount of labeling and the amount of detail is incredible. But I love it. It just sort of invites you in, and it's kind of a map that you're meant to take time to study. It's not something that's minimalistic. There's so many labels, it's incredible, but such beautiful placement, precise placement, just incredible work. So there's me going, right, is there any possible way that I can kind of recreate something like this in Mapbox Studio? I think, you know, a lot of the time, some of the Mapbox maps you might see might just be sort of more of a, more of a standard base map. It perhaps looks a little bit more like, you know, a Google map, or a dark mode or a light mode. So I thought, right, I'm going to have to try and do this. I need to learn this tool. I'm inspired by such amazing cartographic work out there. How can I do anything that's like that? And so I had a bit of a pop at it. And there you go. So it's my kind of version of it, created with Studio. And, you know, direct inspiration with regards to that purple. For the built-up areas in this case, I actually used a lighter colour for the road, but I just really love that purple, and, you know, trying to denote an urban area, just brilliant. The lake and river colours, and then the lake and river labels, and then the label colour and the label halo colour. And then the built-up areas labels, you know, sort of using a sort of slightly lower, slightly softer tone of lilac, but then having a halo that sort of matches the colour of the urban area. And then just labeling, you know, trying to get some of these kind of sweeping mountain range labels, the one down here for the Great Plains, or all these sort of different curving labels, you know, and that's me trying to recreate that in Mapbox Studio. You can do that directly in Mapbox Studio in the dataset editor, so you can create just create a line and assign it as a label. But you know, you can't always naturally find those stunning labels. You've got to create them yourself, you know, and particularly certain sweeping lines that fit within certain geographies or features, like a valley or something like that. But trying to have a go at it. So yeah, this is again just a bit more of a zoomed in version of it. So it was just trying to look at different colors, trying to pick out certain elements for the terrain, trying to deal with the terrain. I mean, as you know, you might notice on some of Eric's maps, he uses these wonderful little gradients of color for mountain peaks and things like that. You know, it'll start off with a dark green and then go to a lighter green and then a brown and then perhaps a white or grey at the top, depending on whether it's snowy or not and something like that. But yeah, trying to pick that out and do that in Studio with some elevation data and playing around with different terrain layers to mix up the look and feel, really. Yeah, so his panoramas, I mean, okay, so these panoramas, if you ignore the bottom half of the screen, the actual map is this top bit. So he's covering this incredible whole thing of New Zealand, the South Island, but I mean, wonderfully clever is the top bit is the West Coast, and then obviously the Eastern view here in the main view. Like I say, please go on his website and zoom in, because this is where the bottom part comes in. That's a bit of a zoomed in view, but I mean, it's just the labeling. It's just crazy, you know, the colors, the shapes, the lines, the curves, the arches, just amazing, beautiful, everything, texture, the water texture, just the mountain colors. Oh, anyway, I'll get carried away too much. So, but also it's that kind of that scale of a panorama, you know, and trying to be able to create that if you wished so. Again, can I sort of kind of create some sort of panoramas? And I think basically, again, it was sort of those three new features in Studio that sort of kind of enabled me to try and have a go at doing this. The top example is just using the Mapbox satellite imagery with 3D terrain and the built-in mountain peak labels, and then using some of that fog in the background, just a little bit of a different color in this particular case, but it kind of masks off the background slightly. That's just looking from the ocean across to the Andes. So I was just trying to see, can I do that? Can I sort of get that actual kind of physical scale in a map in Studio? Yeah, kind of can, you know. And the bottom one here is, again, that's my try and recreate the map I've just shown you that Eric's done. So that kind of part of New Zealand, again, using imagery, but this time trying to mix up the imagery and the cartography. Again, it's something that I've really, really enjoyed trying out and doing, and it was trying to sort of kind of emulate it. I mentioned it at first, you know, Eric's work, I think, is this kind of beautiful mix of cartography and imagery. I just think it's amazing. And so I was trying to do that in the bottom bit. So it's just satellite imagery. I think then there's a few sort of different terrain layers, and I think there's a raster from Natural Earth in there as well at a very low opacity, but it just sort of gives that more sort of softer, almost illustrative look and feel. And again, just trying to play around with labeling certain peaks, certain lakes, certain rivers. There's every single stream in there, well, from Open Data. I think that's the LINS data service. Thank you to them, they're amazing. Yeah, just having a go, trying to see if it was possible, trying to learn and sort of go, well, you know, how on earth am I going to create this in my tool of choice? You know, just mixing, blending layers just to try and get a certain look and feel. Another example I had to do for a part of Italy, and it was looking at, it's actually underwater volcanoes. So again, this time, using the fog and the 3D terrain, mixing up the imagery, mixing up some terrain RGB layers, trying to brighten some of the ground, the greens. There's every single road there, there's every single stream and river. And then this time trying to include some of the bathy stuff, trying to get that view from across the ocean and try and get that kind of 3D look and feel for quite a huge stretch of southern part of Italy. Again, inspiration again straight from Eric with regards to certain elements. There's certain labeling of the bays there is set to the plane of the map, and it just sort of kind of enhances and gives that feel that the ocean is a flat plane. There's little those bay labels have little shadows, and I'm trying to get them to look as though that shadow is under the water, so I can try and offset the label and just give it a darker tone and make it appear as though it is under the water. Some of the label colouring, some of the label placement on the mountains, but another one on there, it might be a little bit small, but Mount Vesuvius, there's a little circular label there, just sort of spans across the volcano beautifully. And you'll notice on some of Eric's maps, he uses these sort of circular labels. There's a stunning piece of work that he did for National Geographic, I think it was, on Mount Rainier, and there's just this beautiful circular Mount Rainier label on there, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, and so you can create some of that. You can mess about with that and sort of using SVGs in this particular case for some of the labels. And then I am inspired. Don't tell John Nelson, but some of the other inspiration on there, almost like a sort of kind of firefly technique for some of the underwater volcanoes, just to try and really pinpoint where they are. So one of the other things that's really been bugging me is Eric's ridge lines. And it's been bugging me for weeks on Twitter, and well, I say on Twitter, but in Mapbook Studio. Yeah, these I think I pointed them out earlier on. These sort of really delicate ridge lines, and I started trying to extract ridge lines from a DEM in QGIS, and then I got some of those actually. I think it was for North Carolina. I did a map on North Carolina, and it's a really nice little technique using the ridge line just to sort of enhance the ridginess of the peaks. But I thought, well, I can't keep doing this for every single geography in the world and doing that. And I thought, right, must be a better way. Went back, had a look at Eric's work again, really studied it, really thought, what am I doing here? How has he done that? And then suddenly realized that that's not what it was. It wasn't particularly a line for a ridge line. It wasn't a geospatial feature in that kind of way. So I tried to recreate it. And hopefully what you can see on this particular ridge, I hope you can still see my cursor. If you can't, but the ridgy bit near the fog at the background, but I sort of managed to kind of create it. Right, how have I done that? Well, and I just suddenly realized it was just actually a shadow layer, like a back shadow layer. It's a terrain RGB layer where we can not include a highlight or an accent, but I'm using just the shadow part of that layer, turning the viewing angle just to 180 degrees or minus 180 degrees, I think it was. Anyway, whatever it is, it's at the back of your view. And it actually sort of did create this sort of little ridge line. That's just the shadow thing. And I was just like, oh, this is brilliant. I've actually kind of sort of managed to get that kind of look and feel. And it was something when sort of like 3D terrain came about in Mapbox, I started to notice that it was sometimes kind of difficult to differentiate between some of the ridges and the peaks and that mountain range and this mountain range. But adding that little ridge just really can, differentiate between the different ridges or mountain ranges. So trying to tie all this together, can I create something that kind of looks a bit like Eric? And remember, I'm doing this all in Mapbox Studio, browser-based Mapbox Studio. And I thought, I'll try this. Right. Thought I'd just try and create a map of Santiago. I don't know why. I spent a ridiculous amount of time technically flying around the world in Mapbox Studio, trying to find bits that are very flat and bits that are very bumpy, just because I like the contrast. And I think I'd done the one on the Andes earlier, and I just sort of found Santiago. And if you view it from the Pacific, you know, it's just this, where is this place, this flat place? And then all of a sudden, you know, the Andes just swoop up. Anyway, so this is just sort of completely inspired by him, but trying to use some of the techniques that he does. So we've got trying to get those little ridge lines. It works really nicely with the fog actually as well. If you have the sort of fog layer set, that ridge line really stands out. Trying to get this ridge line to stand out because there is actually a valley there where the Colorado River runs. Using that purpley color for the urban area just really stands out instead of, you know, on top of the green. The labeling, you know, trying to use that little, those little triangles, they're just beautiful, simple little bit of symbology. That's just a little SVG as in Macbook Studio. And again, just trying to play around with some of the more curved labels for the rivers and streams, and using the same sort of colors. I tend to use a sort of color picker Chrome extension, so I can just sort of kind of see it, and it brings up the color and the hex code or RGB code. Playing around with water textures as well, and things like the tree texture. I had to do that with it's a bit of a custom GeoTIFF thing, but yeah, that I need to figure out how to sort of like actually be able to deliver that on a scalable way. But yeah, it's just something that I've been trying to do, this mix of cartography, imagery, and I think I said at the beginning, sort of like trying to study Eric's color palettes and the tones of the colors that I use in the maps. And what I started then doing was trying to go, okay, so do all these sort of tones and colors work together? What does that look like? And then I started to try and analyze that. So at the bottom there is the range of the colors that are used in there, from different browns, greens, sort of turquoisey, bluey, purpley bits. Again, I think that it was just, I can't remember what website it was. You just stick in an image and it brings out all the colors in there. But I sat there and I thought, oh, hold on a minute, that looks quite nice, that. I mean, it just looks like something from B&Q, you know, a paint thing. But I realized they were all, you know, relatively nice tones. There's not one particular tone that doesn't that doesn't stand out or is too much. And so I just sort of started to do that. And there was at first, there were certain things like the green was just too green. And so, you know, toning that down and then understanding the tone to fit in with the rest of the color tones that I'd used in the map was something that I really got into, started exploring. But it just creates this overall better visual coherence in color and tone for a map. And that's kind of it. That's what I've kind of been doing, just playing, experimenting, trying to push Mapbox Studio, trying to emulate my heroes, heroines, you know, no matter what type of style of map you like. You know, it could be something that's very minimalistic, but go in and have a look at the map and go, why does that work so well? Is it the line thickness or the particular tone of a boundary color, or you know, and how that works, and just go and study them. So yeah, my key takeaways really, again, just said, take time to study others' work. And I mean, really look at it and, you know, see why things work so well, the colors, the halo colors, really study that detail. Like I say, color, shape, particularly like the shape of labels, you know, a curved label can make an incredible, you know, difference to a map, you know, it's just amazing. It's just a skill in itself, is labeling. I'm not suggesting that I've achieved it. I don't think I have yet, but I've got more to learn and I can't wait. So that's great. Label placement, you know, choosing which bits to label, but really just go away, recreate something that inspires you, or buy a cartographer out there that inspires you. Try recreating it, studying, so that you're learning, and then you can pick up on those things and use them in your future work. So that's it. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for having me. Any questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Jonni. That was a really good last point, actually, which kind of bodes well for closing the conference, actually, you know, recreate something that inspires you, which has kind of been a theme, I think, that has kind of been quite familiar throughout a lot of the presentations today, where people have drawn inspiration from other places, whether it's an old map like Liam when he was talking about the West Highland Way. You know, he's drawn inspiration from an old map that he came across. Ken was inspired by something he saw at Tiffany's, and you've been inspired by Eric Knight, which, to be fair, I think a lot of us are probably huge fans of. I'm certainly a big fan of the stuff he's done for National Geographic. So it's interesting that you're inspired by this guy as well. And I think what's also just as interesting is the kind of range of software that's been spoken about throughout today, and what you can actually do with it. You know, it's really impressive to see that there's a range of software and tools available to us now as cartographers or visualizers of geographic data, what, you know, however you want to frame what we are. And that's really good to see, you know, that we've got so many tools available to us now to make impactful and insightful maps. So that's great. There's no questions from anyone, Jonni, because I think you've either wowed everyone, or it's because you're the last presentation of the day. Everyone's very tired, very sleepy, and ready for us to close.
Wake up. Quiz time.
Quiz time, yeah. Well, I'll get to that in a minute.